Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's the same Leg here representing TeamJVS. Here you guys another movie review. This is from Apple TV Plus, and I'm talking about Blitz. This is directed by Steve McQueen. Blitz, the basis of it is a German word. I think it is Blitzkrieg, and that means lightning war. Because basically between 1940 and 1941, there was a lot of bombings that were taking place in London. And specifically from the Germans. And basically, you've got three different aspects that are going on. This is not a real story, but it's done really well. It feels like a real, true life story. Main character name is George. George and his mother, Rita. Rita decides that she wants George to evacuate. So her and her dad are living in a place, and they're gonna stay. She's gonna continue to work. And she wants to send her son away using the train to get him out and get him evacuated. During that time, about 1 million children were evacuated out of London to try to preserve their lives. As far as with Rita, Rita is working basically in a factory to try to make bombs, essentially, while all the other men that are alive are trying to fight this war. This is, again, taking place during World War II. Now, again, this is directed by Steve McQueen, but it's got an amazing cast. Rita is played by Saoirse Ronan. She's amazing, of course, but the killer in this is George, and that's played by newcomer Elliot Heffernan. This has got Harris Dickinson. This has got Benjamin Kellatine. This got Stephen Graham. This has also got Aaron Kellyman. A slew of other amazing talents as well. But I don't want to spoil too much of it, because even though this is something that, is an interpretation of what happened during that era and time, the story along the way that George has to go through is a lot. Is so much. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to break it down. As far as the way they handle the cinematography, the iconography, like the scope of this seems like one of the biggest films that Steve McQueen has ever done. I am surprised at some of the levels that he was able to kind of capture. There was a scene that took place in a, without spoiling anything, a train station. In the train station, something happens, and it is intense. Like, it's already a lot as far as like the different like extras and people that are doing certain things, but there's a cataclysmic thing that happens, and it's just insane. But how it leads to that, like, there's another scene before he gets there where George is just kind of outside, and he's looking up into the sky, and he's witnessing literally hellfire raining down from the sky, and he has to try to save himself, and it's just intense, and it just keeps going and building and building. It's like the moment that George makes a choice very early on in the movie to go and basically jump ship, it puts him in the trajectory of some of the harshest aspects of humans, and for good and for bad. But the other thing about it is George is also half black and half white. And I think his dad is from Grenada and his mother is from London. And there is, it's the 1940s. So the people that look at a person that is black, and what their self-worth is and what they're gonna do, like, there's always this trepidation and this fear, and he's trying to deal with this within himself while also on the run and dealing with life right at him. It's like this kid is being forced to grow up so fast without any kind of regard to his well-being. There's a moment that happens in the movie, and I thought it was shot so well, where he had just got done like barely surviving a situation, and they're having like a puppet show go on in the train station, and he's looking at the puppet show, and instead of looking at the puppets, which is like ignorance is bliss, like, and try to give a moment, like almost like the epitome of a kid looking at a TV or looking at his iPad to try to distract himself from everything that just happened, like something traumatic just happened. Instead of looking at the puppets, he looks down at the person's shoes who was doing the puppeteering, and it's just like, I can't unsee this. I know the harshness of reality. And those moments, and also there's with the character Rita, there's a moment that happens early on where it's a flashback sequence where she's dancing with somebody. And then all of a sudden, as soon as you go outside, it's just the reality kicks in of, who she's with and what that means. And like, it's all different levels of discrimination, hatred, bitterness, greed, abuse, trauma. Like, George goes through it all. George goes through it all. And it's crazy because this is one of the first stories that's kind of like, when I remember the movie Room with Brie Larson, it's kind of like it was this push and pull that you kind of felt like both the character, the son and the mother, are dealing with it equally. And it's not to say that Saoirse Ronan's character Rita isn't dealing with a lot, but it's like George is the one that's got to deal with it because of who he is, what he looks like. So this is very much so his movie. And I think that I wish that as far as the story that she had a little bit more that she had to kind of go through with him. That's honestly my only, not negative, but my only thing that I would have wanted a little bit more, like a conversation of kind of dealing with the ramifications of her actions of trying to get him out and what that actually did, what that potentially could have done. And I didn't really get that, but all the different imagery and the shots and the cinematography were just placated perfectly with this. But then the acting, dude, like Saoirse Ronan is one of the best actresses, period, right? But Elliot coming out of nowhere is just on it. Every single scene, like you just are following along and just praying that he not even survives, but he keeps some level of his innocence through this. And it's almost an impossible thing because the things that he gets exposed to, the things that he has to deal with, things that he has to do. There's one scene in this where he's pretty much getting assaulted, and like, you understand how serious of a situation is when you realize the people, after these bombings that are happening for an extended amount of time, they're not in their right mind. But then they balance it well. Steve balances it well because there's a character named Ify. Ify is like he's one of the guards or security or police officers that are trying to control the crowd, and everybody's losing it. And Ify, this black man, goes and gets everybody back full circle, and it makes George as a character internalize himself differently. He looks at himself not as a negative, as a positive. And I thought that there's so many different balancing acts that happen with that. But it's weird because the characters that are connected to Rita, which are like her homegirls, like there's one girl that played by Aaron named Doris. Doris is racially ambiguous. I don't know if she may be much like George, but it kind of feels like that. And there's a scene that happens with her that kind of felt like, and it just really don't do anything with her character or the characters that are surrounding Rita. So it feels like this more so should have just been focused on George. But I don't know. I think that all in all, the thing about it, their performances, nobody had a bad performance. Everybody was on their gun. Stephen Graham's Rose Albert was different. Harrison Dixon, like as Jack, I think that they did a really good job with him. It just felt like it was unfinished. This film as a whole was so good, but at the same time, it feels like this should have been a series. Like, it feels like there's so much more to the story that needs to kind of progress. And it felt like we kept the track with George, which is the focus of the film, but you had all these surrounding characters that felt like they were building up to something, but they just didn't go anywhere. Even though this was shot perfectly, even though the score by Hans Zimmer was amazing. One of the best scores that he's done in a very long time. The designs, the set designs, the practical effects, the VFX for this was so good. I'm surprised I'm not hearing more about people talking about the VFX, especially like some of the night shots. It's eye-catching. But But yeah, I do think that in hindsight, this would have been something that would have been so much more epic if it went through maybe some years. And like this was just kind of like the first season. I think it would have served us better because while I was watching it, even though it was very masterfully done, very masterfully acted, and very well directed, I felt like at times it was a chore to get through it. Like I felt like at times like I was like I'm getting tired. Like I'm like maybe I need to take a break and come back to it. And I can't imagine because when I watched it at home. I didn't watch it in the theaters in any capacity. And so I think that had this had been a little bit stretched for a little bit as a series, this probably would have been one of the most epic things that we would have ever gotten this year. But all in all, I do think it is a good film. I rest it at a 8.5 or a 9 out of 10. Highly recommend you go and check out Blitz. Thank you guys so much for watching this review. Peace, people.